mother while chatting on Discord with a virtual friend, and that friend heard everything. Ariel was 15 years old. He was quiet, withdrawn, the kind of person who would rather be in his room and staring at his computer than playing soccer or playing football. Not because he was weird, but because he could be himself online. He enjoyed building on Roblox, building games, role-playing with houses, and Tycoon, where you couldn't just earn money, but actually design a space. He could spend hours choosing the texture of the floor, adjusting the lighting, and arranging the furniture to make it just like the real thing. At the end of October, when the evenings grew dark and long, Ariel logged into one of his construction games and saw a site that looked like a real-life building. Not a typical box with windows, but a mansion. Neat hallways, perfectly proportioned, softly lit by lamps, as if the owner actually lived there. Ariel paused, zoomed in, and found himself feeling a little dry-mouthed. It felt so real. He wrote in the chat, "Did you build this?" The reply came almost immediately. Yes. The player's nickname was simple. Ariel didn't want to reveal his real name, but later he called him Rafa. They began chatting directly in the game. Ariel asked about details. Rafa calmly explained. He didn't boast, didn't try to be clever, didn't pretend it was a secret. He simply helped. Within a couple of days, they were building together, dividing the work. Ariel handled the interior, Rafa the facade and layout. And very quickly, this became a daily habit. Online friendships in games like these emerged strangely. No handshakes, no meetups, no shared classrooms or courtyards. But sometimes they're stronger than real-life friendships. Rafa was kind, not politely kind, but genuine. He always asked, "How are you?" and how their day was. When someone in the chat tried to tease Ariel or troll their construction site, Rafa simply ignored them, as if he didn't have this deep-seated need to prove something to strangers. But there was something odd about Rafa that Ariel noticed more and more often. Rafa almost never used his microphone. Even when they played for 3 or 4 hours straight, he'd text in the chat. Ariel thought it was shyness or habit. It happens. But then he noticed Rafa was avoiding his voice too persistently, as if speaking were a risk. Ariel suggested switching to Discord because it would be easier to explain where things should go, as chatting takes too long. Rafa resisted for a long time. He kept replying, "Later, not now, maybe tomorrow." It wasn't until mid-November that he agreed, adding a strange request: just keep it quiet. Ariel remembered the first call down to the last detail. The microphone icon was on the screen, but the voice was a whisper. So quiet that Ariel initially thought his headphones were broken. He cranked the volume almost to maximum, but still had to guess half the words. "Why are you so quiet?" Ariel asked. Rafa fell silent. The seconds dragged on like an eternity. All you could hear was his breathing, as if he were holding the microphone right to his lips and afraid to even inhale too loudly. "It's just that Mom's home," he managed to say. "If she hears me having fun, I'll be in trouble." Ariel didn't yet understand the true meaning of these words at that moment. He thought, strict mom, housework, routine. He even tried to laugh it off, but Rafa whispered almost in panic, "Don't. She doesn't like it when I talk loudly." That's where the disturbing details began. Small ones at first. Rafa said his mother was obsessed with order. Then, that she demanded perfect grades. Then, that his shirt had to be wrinkle-free. His bed made like a hotel. And his room looked like a museum. And that she hated Roblox. She called it a waste of time, a toxic game that dried out his brain. Rafa told it in chunks, as if he was afraid to say it all in one breath. One day, in early December, as they were quietly building a house and arguing over who would make the best staircase, Rafa was whispering on Discord again. Suddenly, his Roblox character froze. At first, Ariel thought it was lag, but a second later, a sharp slam of the door sounded in his headphones. Not a normal slam, but one that sounded as if it had been swung open with force. Then came quick, heavy footsteps, and a female voice, calm but icy. "Rafa, I told you, the toothbrush should be aligned with the edge." It was out of place. Ariel froze, motionless. Rafa's voice was barely audible, as if he had no air left. "Yes, Mom. I'm sorry. I forgot. I'll fix it now. Just let me save the game so I don't lose it." Then came a sound that Ariel later described as the dry slap of a palm against skin. Short, loud, and followed by a microsecond of silence.
Her mother's voice grew louder.
"You dare keep me waiting? Are you making excuses because of this damn game? Rafa started crying. Quietly, as if he was trying to cry silently, so as not to anger her even more. Then there was a rustling sound, as if he'd suddenly moved the microphone, and the call ended. Ariel sat in the lobby, staring at his friend's motionless avatar. He texted him. Are you okay? Reply. But there was no response at all. Rafa disappeared for 3 days. For 3 days, Ariel updated Discord, checked Roblox, and found his heart pounding at every notification. On the 4th day, Rafa returned as if nothing had happened. He texted, Hi. Ariel asked, What happened? Rafa replied, Fell down the stairs, hurt my arm. Everything's fine. Ariel realized it was a lie, and he felt ashamed for what he'd heard and for not saying out loud, I know. But he was afraid of scaring her off, afraid Rafa would disappear forever. He simply continued to be friends, hoping that things would somehow improve. But nothing did. A couple of weeks later, Rafa told me about the punishments. It sounded so absurd that Ariel initially thought he'd misunderstood. She took my chair, Rafa texted around midnight. What do you mean? Ariel replied. She literally said, if you're not perfect, you don't deserve comfort. How do you study? On my knees, and I play on the floor too. Ariel's stomach twisted. He looked at his chair, its soft back, its armrests, and for the first time, he felt guilty about his own ordinary life. He begged Rafa to tell someone. Rafa whispered, his lips trembling. She's smart. She'll say I'm making this up. She'll say I'm sick, and they'll believe her. He wasn't just afraid of pain. He was afraid that even if he tried to break free, he'd be made to feel guilty. And Roblox was the only place where he could forget about home, even for an hour. There, he could build perfect rooms, where no one would yell or demand he keep his brush on point. Months passed. Rafa grew increasingly tense. He would often suddenly fall silent, turning off his microphone, as if he heard footsteps in the hallway. Sometimes, the creaking of a floor, the rustling of fabric, the sound of a door opening would flit through the background, and each time Rafa would whisper, Quiet, quiet, she might hear. And then came a night Ariel would never forget. The evidence later showed the time as 3 a.m. Ariel's room was lit only by a desk lamp, and the window was empty and quiet. He was about to go to bed when Discord showed an incoming call from Rafa. Rafa was crying. Not just tears, but those sobs you get when you try to breathe, but it's like the air won't come through. I can't take it anymore, he squeezed out. What happened? Ariel's voice trembled. She completely ruined my model because of a small spot of glue. It was a school project Rafa had been working on for weeks. He said it was the only thing he had of his own, and now his mother had smashed it on the floor before his eyes. Rafa kept repeating, I'm afraid she's different today. She looks at me like I'm an object. Ariel didn't know how to help through the screen. He suggested what he knew. A game, a distraction, so that the fear could become game-like for at least an hour. They entered a co-op horror game on Roblox. One of those games where you walk through dark corridors, solve puzzles, and all the scary stuff stays within the game. They played for about an hour, and for the first time in a long time, Ariel heard Rafa's laugh. It was real, short, quiet, but alive. Something inside Ariel thought, he's laughing, so he still got it. And then the sound of breaking glass came through her headphones. So real that Ariel immediately realized it wasn't a game. It was somewhere in Rafa's room, or nearby, followed by a woman's scream. This time, without the cold calm. She screamed as if she'd lost control. Are you laughing? Are you laughing while I'm breaking myself to make you human? Rafa inhaled sharply, as if he'd been caught in the act. Mom, please, he whispered. Ariel almost shouted into the microphone. Rafa, go away, go outside, to the neighbors, now! But Rafa didn't run away, and that was the worst part. He couldn't simply leave the house. He was locked in, not by a door, but by fear. There was a creaking sound like a chair or something heavy being dragged across the floor. Then a thud, as if the object had fallen onto the table. A rustling of fabric, a short sob. And suddenly Rafa spoke louder than...
How many of you currently hold an iPhone or iPad in your hand? Please raise your hands.
Never, not a whisper. His voice was firm for the first time. Enough. Leave me alone. I just want to play a little. I'm not doing anything wrong. You're driving me crazy. The words seemed to set the air on fire. The woman shrieked. There was a rush of footsteps. Something fell from the shelf. There was a dull thud, as if someone had hit the furniture. Rafa screamed, "Mom, let go! It hurts!" And his mother screamed incoherently about perfection, order. "You're ungrateful. I'll fix you." The microphone seemed to be lying somewhere on the table or the floor. That's why it wasn't just screams that were audible, but also terrifying, everyday details. Ariel sat, his white fingers gripping the keyboard, screaming into the void. "Rafa, please, run!" Then there was a single sound, not like someone hitting wood, but like someone hitting something living. And immediately afterward, silence. It was so heavy that Ariel felt like his ears were clogged. The seconds dragged on like an eternity. On the Roblox screen, Rafa's character stood motionless. The game continued, but Rafa no longer moved. "Rafa?" Ariel whispered, his voice gone. "Rafa, answer." There was no response over the microphone, only breathing, as if after a fit of hysteria. And then a whisper, strangely calm, even relieved. "Now, yes. Now there will be no more chaos." Ariel's stomach sank. He felt a cold sweat break out on his back, and his hands shook so badly that the mouse slipped. Then there was a sharp sound of cables being pulled out, and the Discord call abruptly ended. Almost simultaneously, Rafa logged out of Roblox. Ariel sat in front of the screen, unblinking. He couldn't cry or speak. His brain tried to convince him it was a mistake, a nightmare, impossible. But the cold inside him said otherwise. And then his gamer reflex kicked in. He always kept instant replay running, a program that saves the last few minutes of screen time. With trembling hands, he pressed the key combination to save the recording. It didn't work the first time. He pressed it again. A notification appeared on the screen. Saved. Last 5 minutes. He had proof. And that only made it scarier. Because proof meant it was all real. For the next few days, Rafa was offline. Ariel messaged him everywhere he could, but there was silence in response. Then Ariel started searching. He remembered a few details: the time zone, snippets of conversations, a city that had once flashed through in a text message when Rafa was complaining about the rain. He searched local news, small websites, and public groups, and he found a short note. Family tragedy. Teenager dies in home accident. It was written dryly, as if it were about a broken object. The mother was described as heartbroken, but doing everything for her son. Ariel was overcome with rage, because he had a file where this exemplary one was whispering, "Now there will be no more chaos." He went to his parents. He entered the room with a laptop and said, "I need help. This is serious." He started the recording. At first, Ariel's mother didn't understand what she was hearing. Then came screams, a blow, silence, the phrase after the blow, and her face turned white. His father stood up and paced the room for a few seconds, as if he couldn't find his place. "We're going to the police," he said, "right now." They contacted those who deal with digital evidence and cybercrime. They were explained how to preserve the originals, make copies, and document everything properly. They sent a video file, audio, chat screenshots, timestamps, and the moment the call ended. A bonus is that the recording shows a Roblox screen, with events synchronized in time. Ariel was afraid they wouldn't be taken seriously. But a few days later, they received a call back. The materials had been sent internationally and contained signs of violence that didn't match the accident theory. The police retrieved the logs, verified that Rafa's account had indeed been online at the time and hadn't been since, requested data from the platforms, and cross-referenced the timeline. When the case became public, Ariel learned details that sickened him. A heavy metal trophy was found in the house, an object not involved in the accidental fall. It bore marks that had been attempted to be washed off. Investigators compared the nature of the injuries and the sound of the impact on the recording, reconstructing the sequence of events. At first, the mother held her own. She said her son was difficult, that he fantasized, that she tried hard. But when they played her the recording of that same whisper after the blow, she broke down. She repeated the word order as if it justified everything. She said she overdid it, that she wanted to fix it, that he drove her crazy. And that was the most terrifying part. She was trying to sound rational, as if she were explaining a trivial matter. The trial dragged on. There were expert examinations, interrogations, and time-stamped confirmations. Ariel testified remotely because he was a minor. He had to hear that night over and over again. Not because he wanted to, but because the truth demanded it. The sentence was harsh and dry. Life imprisonment without parole. Justice had been served, technically. But Ariel felt no relief, because justice doesn't bring back the familiar voice in his headphones. Be sure to subscribe to the channel.